Welcome, everyone. We continue with an introduction as we begin to approach the dissipation of world glamour, which we'll undertake in 2025. So let us be reminded of DK's advice given in Glamour a World Problem on page 142. The disciple must relinquish all sense of tension or of strain and must learn to work with pure faith and love. The less one feels and the less one is preoccupied with one's own feelings and sense of achievement or of non-achievement, the more probable it will be that the work will proceed with effectiveness and the glamour will slowly be dispelled. In this work, there is no haste. That which is very ancient cannot be immediately dispelled, no matter how good the intention or how accurate may be the grasp of the needed technique. So let us begin by looking at the causes of glamour. It was mentioned by one of our group members that the glamour of deception is so prevalent in the world today that we need to look at the causes of glamour, for Master DK defines glamour as deception. But we also have to look at our individual self-deception and group deception as glamours. So breathing effortlessly and easily and orienting your being into a unity with a soul light radiating throughout your aura as the primary force. Unite with the group soul, assuming the altitude as well as the attitude of the observer. Using the sign of cross of divinity, this is the great symbol of light and of consciousness, signifying the vertical light and the horizontal light, the power of attraction and the power of radiation, soul, life, and service. Let us sound the protective formula using this sign of the cross of divinity, touching first the forehead. As the soul, we work in light, then the center of the chest, and darkness cannot touch us. The left eye, we take our stand within the light. The right eye, we work, and from that point, we never move. We sound together as one. I am the soul. I am light divine. I am love. I am will. I am fixed design. And we hold that point of tension as a group as we prepare together to consider deception and begin to serve in the coming months to dissipate world glamour. Let's take some time to review and ponder this section of Glamour, a World Problem. Section 2, The Causes of Glamour, pages 93 to 98. And keep in mind the big picture. We as humanity, as disciples and aspirants, must keep in mind all these levels, the lowest, the physical etheric, next, the astral emotional, and the concrete mind, as we use discrimination from the midpoint, for these are the 18 lower subplanes that must be controlled as we gain control of the three bodies, physical, emotional, mental. These 18 lowest subplanes of the constitution of man are purified, and gradually soul contact is made. And the soul vehicle, located for most of us on the subplane of spiritual discernment. And we must devitalize Maya, dissipate glamour, and dispel illusion in order to reach the level of the higher mind and the soul vehicle. We're given these instructions in relation to the racial and individual growth of glamour. Master DK says, we shall now employ the word glamour to cover all the aspects of those deceptions, illusions, misunderstandings, and misinterpretations which confront the aspirant at every step of his or her way until he or she achieves unity, which in the teachings of the Tibetan is at the point of the fourth initiation, when the soul vehicle is destroyed and no longer needed for the aspirant disciple initiate to progress in service. He says, I would have you note that the word unity is important, for it holds the secret of disillusionment. The secret of disillusionment. As this process of release from glamour has been occultly called. Pause for a moment and consider in this progress that we've made as a group with individual and group glamour, that we are being released from glamour, and it is called disillusionment. It will be apparent to you, if you've studied these instructions with care, that the cause of glamour is primarily based upon the sense of duality, sometimes described as truth versus lies, good versus evil, right versus wrong. What other dualities would you add to this list? He says, if such a duality did not exist, there would be no glamour. And this perception of the dual nature of all manifestation lies at the very root of the trouble or troubles with which humanity is in time and space faced. This perception passes through various stages and constitutes the great problem of the conscious entity. This condition is a difficulty in the realm of consciousness itself and is not really inherent in the substance or matter. The dweller in the body perceives wrongly. The dweller interprets incorrectly that which is perceived. The dweller proceeds to identify with that which is not himself or herself. Think about what you identify with. Do you identify as your physical self in a role that you're given on the physical plane, or a role that you've assumed, and identity that you've assumed. The dweller shifts the consciousness into a realm of phenomena which engulfs the dweller, deludes the dweller, and imprisons the dweller, until such time as he or she becomes restless and unhappy under the sense that something is wrong. When in your life did you reach that point where you realized that something was wrong? Something was not right in relation to this identification that you had assumed. The problem of Maya, he tells us on page 85, is complicated by the fact that upon the physical plane, as upon the astral plane, though this is as yet little realized, you have the battle of a pair of opposites. These are of a different nature in some respects to those found upon the astral plane. On the physical plane, and by that he means upon the etheric levels of the physical plane, whereon the deceptive power of Maya is experienced. There is the meeting of the forces of the subjective world of the personality and the ancient energies of matter itself, brought over as latent seeds from an earlier solar system. This is one of the most challenging concepts to understand, to really assimilate into one's thinking, that these are etheric levels of the physical plane where this deceptive power of the Maya that must be devitalized, where this is experienced, and that it is part of it is relates to an earlier solar system. We have heard about this, we've talked about it, but it is a very difficult concept to really assimilate into one's higher mind from the concrete mind in a way that can be useful. In Agni Yoga, the book Heart, Sloka 298, it is described in this way: more than anything else, direct sensation of the invisible world is what transmits an understanding of it. Nothing can help the heart if it does not wish to surrender itself to this feeling and sensation. A careful approach to the phenomena of life shows readiness to apply the experimental method in investigating them. Nobody should think of this assertion as something abstract. Rather, one should fully understand just how close the teaching is to every aspect of life, since it is rooted in experience. Likewise, one should understand all the rhythms in the alternation of events. The train runs through the fields, but when it enters a tunnel, only a child screams about its disappearance. Let us stay calm throughout the multifaceted movement of events. So let us consider further this concept. As one recognizes that duality of the physical and the etheric, he or she comes finally to the recognition that they are not what they seem to be, and the phenomenal world of appearances is not identical with reality. as one had hitherto supposed it to be. From that moment on, one comes to the sense of duality, to the recognition of otherness, and to the perception that one's sense of dualism should be ended, and that a process of unification and an attempt to achieve at one-ment should be undertaken. From that moment, the troubles of the evolving man or woman begin to be observed by the self, the individual, and consciously encountered. And the individual faces a long period of extrication from glamour and the entering into that world wherein only unity is known. And this is that whole period up to really the third and even the fourth initiation. So every life we come back in and recapitulate and then become able to achieve the consciousness that we had previously achieved and move forward in the extrication from glamour, which, as DK says, is that distortion, the deception of the opposites, the misunderstanding and the misinterpretation of the pairs of opposites in our experience. The stages from then on might be enumerated as follows. First, the stage wherein the material world is recognized and valued. Temporarily, it is made the goal of all activity, and one refusing to recognize the difference existing between one's own etheric presence and higher presence and the material natural world seeks to identify the self with it and to find satisfaction in purely physical pleasures and pursuits. Often a recapitulation for those who have achieved a higher level in a previous incarnation that occurs in childhood, this identifying with purely physical pleasures and pursuits. And this stage itself is defined in two parts. That wherein satisfaction is sought in an almost automatic response to the physical instincts, to sex, food, warmth, and those loom large in one's consciousness. And the animal nature in man is made the center of the attempt to produce some sense of unity, because the inner and subtle one is as yet weak in impact, as is esoterically called. A physical unification temporarily takes place, which serves to deepen the glamour and to delay progress into freedom. And we can note, children, teenagers, where this pursuit, where the subtle higher side is weak in impact, and it can take over an individual's life for a time until they seek a higher level of satisfaction related to other aspects of being. The stage wherein satisfaction and the sense of oneness is sought in the realm of material possessions and in the establishing of a center of beauty and comfort in life on the physical plane. How much of a life is spent acquiring possessions, acquiring status in order to be more comfortable on the physical plane, wherein the man or woman can be at home and oblivious to a growing sense of dualism, which day by day gets steadily stronger. This stage only takes place ages later, and this is, the recapitulations of previous incarnations, when the aspirant is about to reorient the self to truth and to take the first steps towards the probationary path. It is a correspondence towards the end of the path of evolution to the stage above mentioned, but the person experiencing it is a very different person to the one who now seeks synthesis in the materialization of beauty upon the outer plane. The subtle individuality is now becoming dominant. And I think when we look into the world, we see those who are most admired in the quote unquote public arena are those who have achieved some great sense of celebrity or material acquisition, and they're held in a kind of reverence by the general public and not examined in terms of the higher that then begins to emerge. Secondly, the stage wherein the person, first of all, becomes aware of the duality, which is expressed by the words, the man and the forces. And the individual becomes alive to the fact that he or she and all of humanity are the victims of forces and energies over which they have no control, and which drive men and women hither and thither. The individual becomes aware also of forces and energies within the self over which one likewise has no control, and which force them to act in various ways, making them frequently the victim of their own revolts, their own acts, and selfishly directed energies. When that purely selfish motive is behind, or what they assume is an appropriate motive in terms of the culture in which they're raised, even in terms of a particular philosophy or religion in which they've been raised. Here, the individual discovers unconsciously at first and later consciously the initial duality, the physical body, and then the vital or etheric body. One is the mechanism of contact upon the physical plane. The other is the mechanism of contact within the inner forces, energy, and worlds of being. This vital body controls and galvanizes the physical body into an almost automatic activity. DK referred to this duality in an earlier instruction. And this stage is one of great difficulty for the individual man or woman and for humanity as a whole. And we are in the age of struggling to achieve soul consciousness individually, in group, and to bring more of humanity into soul consciousness and out of this stage. In Agni Yoga Heart, Sloka 297, it's described in this way. The teacher rejoices when the manifestation of the subtle body's sensations in the earthly shell becomes tangible. A person whose consciousness is being refined is perfectly right to feel that our essence is imprisoned within a dense shell. Of course, pain is sure to manifest when the subtle body connects with the network of nerves that runs over the surface of the body. Moreover, the subtle body has to recapture its own dwelling whenever it returns to the body. You already know that the subtle body is somewhat higher than the physical, which is why there is discomfort every time it returns. You know, for those who have, you remember when you first started meditating and you achieved a level of awareness and then coming back into that unity with your shell, the physical shell, the adjustment that it takes, and how it, for some people, can cause the need to really slow down and to shift their physical environment in order to accommodate, an easier return. Once the subtle world has become a natural continuation of the earthly realm, there will inevitably arise the feeling that the subtle body is constantly separated from the earthly one. And this actually becomes the mystical experience for many. it could become an important new task for doctors to differentiate the pains that result from illness and those that arise from this movement of the subtle body within the dense shell. So it's also possible to approach the sensations of the subtle body by following this medical path. In this way, one can connect two tasks, the physical, the spiritual and the physical, and many psychologists and those teachers who are psychologists have offered to people who are in this process of beginning to build consciousness, something that was related in psychosynthesis by Roberto Assagioli, the mantra, I have a body, I am not my body. I have emotions, I am not my emotions. I have a mind, I am not my mind. I am the soul. And it's one of the things that continuously can assist those who are in that state of beginning to transition onto the path of probation and to the path of purification. Master DK says, people are still so ignorant of the reality which shines under the envelope which envelops it, as the old commentary calls it, that true perception is difficult and at first well nigh impossible. Blindly and ignorantly, men and women have to cope with this first pair of opposites. It is this that we see happening in the world at this time. The masses are awakening to the realization that they're victims and the exponents of forces over which they have no control and of which they have no understanding. They would like to assume control over them and are determined to do so whenever possible. This constitutes a major problem today in the economic field and in the field of daily living and of government. And what is happening today for those who are more advanced in awakening consciousness on various levels, because they have been studying the ageless wisdom for so long and have internalized a higher perspective, there can be glamours of achievement that arise that then are translated into criticism and judgment of those who are not operating with the same level of higher mind. And glamour is rampant now in the world in relation to politics, religion, how people should be living their daily lives, and in the field of economics. So it's a point to pause and remind ourselves that we are part of those systems, and we must recognize our own glamours and our own illusions in relation to our ability to impact and how we should approach that through meditation and through higher group work rather than criticism of those systems that we have no control over on the physical plane, and to think about how we affect a higher influence with those with whom we have direct relationship. It's just something to ponder as one considers individual glamours and group glamours, and particularly the idea that we are living in a world of truth and lies, of right and wrong, of good and bad. Let's look at that further. So just to relate this to our work along other lines, Maya, glamour, illusion develop on those lowest 18 subplanes. The first relation, the first essential relation, is to understand and integrate the physical etheric into a unity. The second essential relation, the astral etheric, so that the astral body is controlled. And the third essential relation, the brain-mind relation, so that the fourth relation, in which the soul and personality begin to merge, can be the focus on the path of discipleship. And the causal body can emerge as the third initiation, to be then destroyed at the fourth, when the soul is fully the manifestation of the life. And I'll just refer people back to this section of Treatise on a Cosmic Fire, where DK gives us this description of the causal body, the soul vehicle, and the kind of progression in which this develops as we take on these essential relations, as we devitalize Maya, as we dissipate glamour, as we dispel illusion. This causal sheath appears in greater and greater vibrancy, this sphere of vibrant living substance that has three fiery points. At the heart of the sphere, this central blaze of light emanating rays. Note plural, it's rays. These rays are given as 7 in number and play upon these points or circles analogous to the electrons in the atoms of science, and at this stage produce most effect upon the astral permanent atom. And this stage acknowledges that in this fifth root race, fifth subrace, we are still in this process as humanity of moving out of astral polarization as an entity, as humanity as a whole. The physical permanent atom has a position relatively close to the positive center, and the force plays through it and passes on to the astral permanent atom. This is that from the first to the second relation, passes on in the form of 5 rays, the 5 dominant rays of this fifth root race, fifth subrace, of partly colored light, which blend with the intensely vivid hue of the astral permanent atom, increase its intensity until the blaze is so excessive that it appears to the onlooker as if the 2 points have blended. The physical and the astral blend, and these 2 electrons merged, and in the merging produce such an intensity of light that they are seen dissolving. The second initiation is part of this whole process. The mental unit having a position within the causal body analogous to the planet furthermost from the sun, from the central point, becomes vibrant likewise. The mental unit approaching the third initiation, becoming mentally polarized. And the 2 other points, considered now as one, begin to interact with the mental unit, brain, mind, that essential relation. And a similar process is set up and is pursued until these 2 points, circulating around their positive center, also approach each other, blend, merge, and dissolve. So that's just a very rudimentary way in which one might use symbols to create an image to work with as one is considering one's causal vehicle. World tension today consists in the fact that physical force and etheric energy are at grips. Forget not what I earlier told you, he says, that etheric force is closely related to the monad, or the highest spiritual aspect. It is life itself on the verge of externalization. And this is in the grand scheme of our planetary evolution. Hence the emphasis today upon the spirit of humanity, upon the spirit of a nation, and the spirit of a group. This is all the result of the battle going on between this pair of opposites in the field of human affairs and in the field of individual average human living. So rather than looking at the table of the planes, one can look at concentric circles, this particular dynamic with the physical etheric in the middle, but one can reverse it as well. But never forget, as this soul expands, all the rays are involved. And those 5 that are in our particular root rays and subrays that are dominant. And that this is a constantly moving, spiralic progression that we are part of. As our awareness moves outward, or if we were to reverse the concentric circles in the spiral, inward. And in effect, it is both simultaneously, as Master DK tells us. It is, however, this conflict fought out to the point of synthesis and at one-ment, eventually, which produces the reorientation of the race and of the individual to the truer values and to the world of reality. It is this conflict, successfully waged, which lands an individual, woman or a man, as the self and the mass as a whole upon the path of purification. When there is unification of these energies upon the physical plane, you then have one pointed activity and a determination to travel in a specific direction. My interpretation of this is often descriptive of what occurs in Sagittarius with the one pointed direction, with that influence, and those 2 different spirals merging, and the shift, the reversal of the wheel. There follows the resolution. Note this word and its usage. Resolution. Think of that word. Resolution. Think of the word in terms of what a solution is. Again. We go through this process again and again and again. The resolution of the duality into a unity, and then into another unity and yet another unity. It's a continuous process. The resolution works out in the early stages, where the average type of aspirant is concerned, into a temporary astral unity. And then there emerges the one-pointed devotee. On the constitution of man, it's identified it as the highest point of the astral plane, emotional idealism. And this aspirant, this devotee, is found in all fields of religion, of science, of politics, or in any other department of life. The aspirant's etheric unity producing reorientation, that point where the two spirals, the two wheels spiraling together, merge into a fourth dimensional experience. Up until this time, controlled or being astrally polarized with that mystical, astral, emotional approach. Glamours do take over a group, take over a nation, take over a political point of view, and that has to be dissipated. And the illusion has to be dispelled on the concrete mind, the level of the concrete mind. That will eventually result in a clear vision, a grasp of truth, and an immediate way to go. But this astral unity serves temporarily to glamour us with a sense of achievement, of surety, of power, and of destiny. So those are the pivotal glamours, those working in the fields of religion, of science, of politics, psychology, in any department of life. Those are the big glamours that must be dissipated. And the illusion that one can see the whole picture has to be addressed. That illusion that we have covered in our previous sessions. As none of us, no group, no institution, no individual can see the whole. And that is why we work along the path in order to achieve the third and fourth initiations so that we can achieve a clear vision and have a grasp of the truth in a sense of the truths from all knowledge on the atmic plane, the ideals that then come through the Buddhic plane and hierarchy to help us identify those ideals as truth that we can begin to get impressions of. And the aspirant goes ahead blindly, furiously, and ruthlessly sometimes, until suddenly he or she or the group is brought sharply up against changing conditions and recognizes another and far more difficult situation. The pairs of opposites upon the astral plane confront the aspirant, confront the dweller, and the aspirant becomes Arjuna upon the field of battle. And all the aspirant's sense of at-one-ment, of direction, of surety, of oft-times smug satisfaction, that disappears. And the dweller becomes lost in the fogs and glamours of the astral plane. DK tells us that this is the plight of many well-meaning disciples at this time. And upon it, he says, I must for a moment dwell, because this group, and he's referring to the seed group that he had put together for the dissipation of glamour, when it can work as a group, has for its intended task the dissolution of some of the world glamour. Someday, he says, or he stated, and let us hope that it will take place before long, this group, the group that he assembled, and other such groups should work as a group and under the direction of their master, in piercing the world glamour and letting in some light and illumination so that humanity may walk from henceforth more truly on the way in safety. It's good to pause at this time. This particular excerpt from a treatise on white magic. In the life of the disciple, through meditation and discipline, he learns to reach high moments of interlude whenever he concentrates his forces on the plane of soul life, and then again, by an act of his will, he breathes forth his spiritual purposes, plans, and life into the world of experience. The thought form that is constructed as to the part one has to play and the concentration of energy which one has succeeded in bringing about, this becomes effective. The energy needed for the next step is breathed forth by the soul and passes down into the vital body, thus galvanizing the physical instrument with the needed constructive activity. That aspect of the plan which he has appreciated in contemplation, and that part of the general purpose of the hierarchy in which the soul feels called upon to cooperate, is breathed forth simultaneously via the mind into the brain, and thus drives the thought forms from him. So as we progress along the path, when we have more frequent flashes of intuition, which is what this is, we are able as individuals to create a direction in our life. This then we nurture, and in group formation, we have to recapitulate on a higher level through telepathic and meditative unity as a group. And there's a much higher standard in terms of what cooperation is and the process that must be undertaken in order to do this. To the energies which one has generated within the self, the disciple learns to add that of the group, which he's attempted to serve with love and understanding. All disciples of any standard gather around them the few or the many that they've found themselves able to aid and assist. The purity of the energy generated by this group depends on their selflessness, their freedom from authority or the control of the disciple, and the quality of their spiritual aspiration. So we've just gone through these stages. The first essential relation. Most of us have physical etheric bodies of first or the third and seventh. Some have a first. The astral field, the first ray, second ray, sixth or fourth, that gets combined in the group process. The mental bodies, first ray, fourth ray, fifth ray, third ray, linking into what has in the individual developed as the causal body, and then the processes of group work, group meditation, study, and service. This develops the group soul light in a new unity. This is a dynamic process. And now as we unify our groups on a global scale, demands much of us in terms of selflessness, freedom from authority or control of a disciple who's been in a leadership position or in a point of authority over a group or in a group, and to set a field of equity and responsiveness in a new selflessness, the selfless group, and maintain and expand this quality of spiritual aspiration, all with a great spiralic effect on the subtle levels. It's also good to note, because there are some who are not as familiar with the contemplative process, that some people by their sheer strength of will reach a point where they directly inhibit the processes of the lower mind. And if you picture the mental body as an ovoid, DK says, surrounding the physical body and extending much beyond it, and if you realize that through that ovoid are constantly circulating thought forms of various kinds, the content of the individual's mind and the thoughts of the environing associates, so that the mental egg is colored by predominant attractions and diversified by many geometrical forms, all in a state of flux or circulation. You can get some idea of what DK means. Now, when an individual proceeds to quiet that mental body by inhibiting or suppressing all movement, the individual will arrest these thought forms within the mental ovoid. This will stop the circulation and may bring about results of a serious nature. This inhibition has a direct effect upon the physical brain and is the cause of much of the fatigue complained of after a period of meditation. If persisted, it may lead to disaster. And I'm including this because he says all beginners do it more or less, and until they learn to guard against it, they will stultify their progress and retard development. The results may indeed be more serious. And this is particularly important in groups where it is vital that the mental body is not stultified, that these circulating thought forms of various kind, they are colored. They don't have to dominate, but it is to use the triple light, as we've learned in the glamour technique, to allow the higher light to control. And that's the whole process. It does not mean that we destroy thoughts. It means that we dissipate the fog. So if you are in a group, particularly, and you find that you are working with thoughts, one technique is to imagine the thought as a geometric figure and see the thought recede and just kind of move off out of the field of focus. Not destroy the thought, to let it float out of the consciousness. And there are many techniques you can use, but it is really important when we work together that we are not directing the triple light to thoughts that others have particularly, but to release that thought. And it will diminish over time if it is not a thought that is helpful for the group. DK tells us disciples must now organize for a steady, united effort. This must take the form of a closer cooperation between all groups and a standing together in a closer relationship, thus strengthening each other's hands and, where possible, pooling resources. It should result also in a united push forward of all spiritual and occult agencies and the carrying of the truth along all possible lines down among the masses of men and humanity. This is being modeled for us in many ways. We have many esoteric efforts now to begin to do this. So within those efforts, I'll just cause us to stop and think about the ways in which we can bring Dwalku's teachings to the fore in relation to the way in which we deal with our own glamours of achievement or accomplishment or knowing the truth, so that we can constantly work to, as groups, dissipate those glamours, and to, if we find that a group we're working with or people within our groups, that there are thought forms we telepathically receive that just need to be, moved to a different part of the field. We are not to destroy those thought forms. We're to dispel illusion. It's a completely different process. So think about that in terms of your own work and the work of our groups, particularly as we move forward with World Glamour. Dwalkul tells us in a treatise on white magic, no glamour, no illusion can long hold the aspirant who has set to the task of treading the razor-edged path which leads through the wilderness, through the thick-set forest, through the deep waters of sorrow and distress, through the valley of sacrifice, and over the mountains of vision to the gate of deliverance. Our whole path up to the fourth initiation. This aspirant may travel sometimes in the dark, and the illusion of darkness is very real. Many travel sometimes in a light so dazzling and bewildering that the way ahead can scarcely be seen. May know what it is to falter on the path and to drop under the fatigue of service and of strife. May be temporarily sidetracked and wander down the bypaths of ambition, of self-interest, and of material enchantment. But the lapse will be but brief. Nothing in heaven or hell, on earth or elsewhere, can prevent the progress of the one who has awakened to the illusion, who has glimpsed the reality beyond the glamour of the astral plane, and who has heard, even if only once, the clarion call of one's own soul. Let us move into the rainbow bridge, the bridge of soul. And as we build the Antakarana, which for each of us replaces the causal body, the solar vehicle, the lotus at the fourth initiation, we hold the term that is used in the ageless wisdom. The goal, not is, but me. As you construct the rainbow bridge, as we construct the rainbow bridge, invocation and evocation, as we work with glamour and illusion, and look towards the two highest planes, the monadic and the logoic, the planes of transfiguration from the point of view of the higher initiate. By then, after the fourth initiation, the processes of transmutation have dropped below the threshold of consciousness. And though the initiate, working with forms in the three worlds, has his instrument upon the outer physical plane, his own work and hierarchical activity is strictly triadal, strictly in relation to the plan, and monadic, with a steadily growing responsiveness to logoic intent. So we note where we are in working with discrimination to develop the opening of the vortices of the soul vehicle. We work together as part of, or the aspiration to be part of, the new group of world servers in this regard. Another way to look at it is in relation to the table that we are given. And let us close by sounding together the mantra of light, which we sound whenever we use the group formula. Radiance we are and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light, we work and turn the darkness into day. As we work together and move together along the path, gratitude for your service.